I've done something for this PC build that I have never done before, and I can't wait to share it with you. Before that though, today I'm gonna walk you through this $600 gaming PC build that's very easy to copy, and I'll provide you with everything you need, such as the parts list and a full benchmarking run. We're actually benchmarking in 1440p, which is kind of crazy for this budget of a build. We also already posted the full step-by-step PC building tutorial video on the extra channel if you need that. Everything else that you'll need will be in the cheat sheet that's down in the description. That'll have the cable management guide, parts list, alternative options, and a bunch more. Real quickly before we jump into it, I want to quickly shout out the sponsor of today's video, which I actually got a little giddy for when they first emailed me, boot.dev. You've probably seen their ads on YouTube before, but if you haven't, they're one of the few platforms that's actually trying to fix the problem of trying to learn coding online. Boredom. They use actual game design mechanics to keep you engaged while you're learning back-end development in Python, Go, or JavaScript. But the kicker is that they also have little side quest skills to learn, like Linux and actually using the terminal instead of a GUI like a noob. They even show you how to build real things like your own Pokédex in different languages. I spent some time on it myself, and I'm not gonna lie, it was way more fun than I expected. You write tons of codes or terminal commands, solve real-world problems, and you level up your account and earn XP as you go. If you get stuck, there's this AI bear wizard named Boots who doesn't just give you the answers, but he helps you figure things out yourself so you're actually learning. So if you've been wanting to get serious about learning back-end development, then go to boot.dev and use my code ZachsTechTurf, and that'll save you 25% off if you go with an annual plan, but you can also try it out for free. This one's legit. It's a great way of learning some new skills and have fun while doing it. It's linked down below at the very top of the description. Jumping straight into the parts list, we'll start with the CPU, and this is of course gonna be the Ryzen 5 5600. For a $600 total build price, I'd really only consider this one or maybe the 5500 if you want to save some money. I'd rather focus on a solid CPU and GPU combination, so we'll definitely want a good chip to pair with this beefy GPU. More on that later though. I picked up this 6-core and 12-threaded AM4 option for just $74 on AliExpress, but you should know the drill by now. If you don't want to buy from there, then just grab it on Amazon for a little extra money. Now, of course, I would prefer to go with AM5 for every build that I do, but when you're using a total budget price of like $750 to $800, it's really difficult to do that, and you'll end up sacrificing too much of your GPU budget, which I don't want to do. An AM5 motherboard does indeed allow you to future-proof the build a bit with CPU options for years to come and the latest DDR5 RAM, but with this small of a budget, we just can't squeeze that in there. We're actually going with a complete opposite of future-proofing motherboard, as this is just a Machinist B450M, which I picked up for $49 also on AliExpress. This is about as cheap as a brand new AM4 motherboard goes, and I'm not gonna lie, the only reason I went with it was to keep the cost down and for the white aesthetic. With only 2 RAM slots, no VRM heatsinks, and only 1 M.2 slot, there's not a trace of a bell or whistle, but I don't really need all that when we're trying to maximize performance. Truth is, we're still gonna get the full capability out of our CPU and RAM, so in a build like this, that's all I really care about, and kind of the aesthetic. Speaking of that RAM though, this is the Pinnacle Conduit DDR4 kit clocked at 3200 megahertz with a CL rating of 16, and I did manage to squeeze in a 32GB kit instead of 16. Usually for budget builds, I have been trying to save money with 16, but as we're seeing, more and more games are starting to utilize more than that, so I do like not having RAM capacity as a bottleneck. Plus, since the motherboard only has 2 RAM slots, I'd rather just buy the 32GB kit now rather than having to completely replace a 16GB kit. Working our way down the motherboard, next up is the SSD, and this is the Clevcraft C910. It's a 1TB NVMe Gen 4 option and almost always the most affordable option, so that's why I go with it. This time I did install that optional heat pad on there because this motherboard didn't come with a built-in heatsink. And to polish off the Mobo prep, we gotta somehow cool the 5600, and I'm sure you've already seen, but that's just a stock Ryzen cooler that I painted all white. Now do realize, if you buy a CPU from AliExpress, it most likely will not come with one, so definitely factor that into your budget if you're copying this from home. I'm not gonna add that price to my budget because I have a ton of these sitting on the shelves from building PCs over the years, and chances are if you're an experienced builder, you probably do too. If you don't, then I recommend just grabbing this Thermalright Assassin X 120R SE ARGB for less than $20. Now that the motherboard's prepped, let's move on to the power supply. And by the way, this is the exact order that I usually build in. The footage you're seeing now of me prepping the power supply was from a Twitch live stream where I build all of these PCs. We actually condensed down this 3-hour stream into just the PC building steps, and that video's on the ZTT Extras channel. This unit is the Raid Max Cobra 650 watt, which is 80 plus bronze and rated tier C on the PSU tier list. That can be found on zttbuildhelp.com, by the way. I only paid $39 for this, but more than likely you'll have to pay a bit more because this was a really good deal. And for a $600 build, I personally have always thought that a tier C rated power supply is perfectly fine. Just make sure that you get one that has enough amount of wattage for your graphics card. Before getting to that though, I did of course sneak in some cable extensions into the build, but I kept the cost down with this Okino 16 gauge kit. I've been really liking these because they're cheaper than the Asia Horse ones, which I usually go with, and they look just as nice. The case I chose is also from Okinos, and this is actually one of their brand new models, being the Mirage 4. This is an upgraded version of their super popular Air 3, which I also really like. The Mirage 4 is still a beautiful fish tank with a USB-C connector at a budget price, but this time it's also dual chambered, so you can do as much or as little cable management as you want to in the back. It also comes with 3 pre-installed ARGB fans, but this time there's 2 intake fans on the bottom and 1 rear exhaust. And honestly, for $70, this is just a very tough to beat micro ATX option. But finally, without further ado, the last part I have here is the graphics card. Also, quick reminder that everything I just talked about is down in the description along with that cheat sheet. But yeah, this is an Asus Dual RTX 3070. If you know that card, then you'll know this isn't what it normally looks like, because I actually took this all apart and painted it, which I've never done before. In the past, I've dabbled with painting GPUs, but only ever small sections of it. In order to paint the entire shroud, and especially the back plate, you'll usually have to take apart the whole thing, and despite my long history of PC building, I've never actually done that before. I recorded the whole thing so you can see it, and one trick I used was to trace out the GPU on a piece of paper. That way I could put all the little screws exactly where they lined up so I didn't forget where they go. Highly recommend doing that. But yeah, since I did open up the whole thing, I also wanted to grab some experience with reapplying the thermal paste and thermal pads, so I knocked that out as well. Honestly, the whole process went pretty smoothly, other than having to do it twice because I forgot to remove the plastic sheets on the thermal pads. After a couple hours of work, I honestly think it turned out amazing, and I already want to do that again for the next one. Other than genuinely wanting to finally try this process, the main reason I did it was because I couldn't find a single good deal on a white GPU. I definitely could have gone with a white RX 6600 or maybe a 7600, which usually sits in stock above $200 brand new, but for this build, I wanted more performance than that. Despite only having 8 GB of VRAM, the RTX 3070 can definitely still kick it even in 1440p, but we did have slightly worse results than the last time we used one, which was pretty recently. In our $1,000 full setup guide video, that black and wood grain PC also featured the 3070. I was surprised then that we got such good 1440p results for a sub $300 GPU, but we used an AM5 7400F, which actually performed better. With today's build and the 5600, we could definitely see some struggling with the older AM4 architecture, but we're about to cover that all in the benchmarking section. Before that though, here's what the full parts list is looking like, and my total came out to $634. I will admit that there are a couple caveats to this one, and if you're trying to copy it, I'd honestly shoot for $650, which would still be pretty good. That power supply deal is going to be pretty tough to beat, and you may or may not have an extra Ryzen cooler laying around. But again, everything you need to copy this build is down the cheat sheet, just in case you can't find something in stock. But yeah, let's jump into those benchmarks now, and first we'll start with the new Doom: The Dark Ages. This is a good example because we couldn't even get it to hit 60 FPS with any setting in 1440p. We did turn on DLSS to performance mode though, and that got up to at least a playable 59 FPS, but still not exactly great results for a fast-paced shooter. Even in 1080p, we used the same settings, but here we got it up to 63 FPS, which is a little bit better. Without DLSS, just so you know, it was only at 46. Next up was Assassin's Creed Shadows, and in 1440p high settings, again with DLSS on, we got 65 FPS. This felt pretty decent, and honestly, I'm just happy to see that we can play the brand new titles in 1440p with this budget of a build. Again, we did have to enable DLSS in order for that to happen, but that does seem to be the going rate for NVIDIA-based budget builds these days. For some easy to run titles, here's GTA 5, and with very high settings, this P is still smoking it with 126 FPS. The Finals is up there at 109 FPS in 1440p high, Fortnite's at 173 FPS in 1440p Pro, and even Marvel Rivals is at 67 FPS in 1440p high. Here's the rest of the games that we tested in 1440p, and honestly, the rest of them look pretty good. The RTX 3070 can struggle a bit without DLSS at this higher resolution with the brand new titles, but otherwise, it's still plenty capable. If you want to see a more in-depth benchmarking run, then be sure to check out that dedicated video, which we just uploaded to the ZTT Extras channel. And if If you want to know how the cooling department looks with this custom painted shroud and Mirage 4 case, here you can see that the GPU is perfectly fine at 70 degrees in Black Myth Wukong. However, the CPU temps were actually kind of high. We did a very quick and basic round of troubleshooting, like reapplying the thermal paste and all that. We didn't find anything obvious. It might be the budget motherboard. We didn't have enough time to fully dive into this and swap out the coolers and all that, but everything seems in check except for this super budget machinist motherboard. Here's what the BIOS settings look like, by the way. So yeah, there might be some kind of weird setting or default value in here which aren't the norm for a 5600. Either way, the temperatures were still acceptable, but not as low as I would have liked. But yeah, for about 600 to 650 bucks, I'm still pretty impressed by the performance and definitely the aesthetics of this build. As a final reminder, if you want to copy it for yourself, I'd recommend checking out that cheat sheet down below, and the video on the screen now is a different way of spending $600, which is honestly a pretty good option as well.